glad you're here. Today we're going to talk about shadow. It's day number 16, which means we are officially into the second half of our 30 watercolor tips and tricks. So that's pretty awesome. And if you've got your calendar and you're marking off days, make sure you keep doing so because it's so fun to just watch progress in any part of life, I think. And this is what we're going to paint today. It's going to look something like this. And we're just going to talk about shadow. So I guess let's get into our supplies. Pencil, kneaded eraser. You might need your felt tip pen just to sign it today. Round watercolor brush. This is a size 10. If you've got a towel and a little jar of water, that is great. And I have my favorite paint set and a little spray bottle for my paints. I've already lit my candle and it's October. So if any of you have mums outside, go cut a little bit of them. You'll hardly even notice it outside and then you get them inside too. What a win. So I'm all set up on them, cozy. So you do the same. And okay, so we're going to get into it a little bit for shadow. So the way I wrote about it for this and the way I was thinking about it is pretty simple, like just creating a shadow next to the work we're doing. So mainly I'm talking about like this shadow, but then I was like, well, we really can incorporate it more than that. So you'll see it in other ways as well on our sketch and our painting today. Let's read it together. So day 16, a shadow can add a lot to your art. It'll look more correct if you intentionally place highlights opposite to the shadow side. So shadow is one thing and values is another thing. But if you think back to day 5, where we talked about the 3 values, and we were really talking about having a highlight, sort of a mid-tone and a shadow, and how that can sort of transform your artwork just where you get depth and dimension in a way that you might not have otherwise. And we're going to incorporate that again today some, but I think that these two go together really well because if you are doing, let's say over here is your sun, your source. Let's say you have one source of light, which we kind of never do, but one source of light and it's over here and we go our highlight closest to the light source, our mid-tone and our shadow, which is furthest to our light source. That's where our shadow is going to go today. And the more you reinforce highlight, mid-tone, shadow, and then put your shadow, the more striking your effect is even going to be. So if you work from photo references or things like that, you're going to look for where the light source is and where the shadows are, and that's going to give you all the clues and cues, and it's going to be awesome. Same thing outside if you're working outside. But if you go work outside, and just a side note about shadows, if you go do plein air painting, which is when you go and you set up your paints outside, just realize that the sun is going to move and all of your light and shadows are going to change. So if you do that, when you figure out what you're going to paint, I highly recommend take a photo as well, because as you sit there, you'll kind of try to paint quickly, but all the light sources are going to change and you might want a reference of how they started when you first got there. So lots of ways to talk about shadow. We're going to do it in kind of a simple way today. So let's get started. I was just looking, I think this one will actually go really cutely with day 10. So this one here is day 10 and this is today, and they're kind of cute little buddies. So if you want to see this one, day 10. Okay. So we are going to start with our sketching. Well, let's start with our observing first. First, I've got a handful of them here. Let me show them to you. I started it a little differently and I ended up changing it because I thought we needed just a little bit more focus on shadow. So the one I initially had was probably this one here. And it's just this. But do you notice what happens with the shadow? When you look at this like vase or whatever, it looks like the shadow's cutting into it over here, and so the shape isn't quite symmetrical. So that's something to watch out for. That just happens sometimes, and it's tricky to not have it happen. So just kind of watch for that. It's no big deal. And I think this one is beautiful. It's got really dark little palm flowers over here. I changed it one time. I made the stems green instead of dark. And I just did a different shape and tried to focus more on shadow here on like the pot. Also, you can notice that these 3 flowers have shadow at the base, but then at the top, because our light source is over here to the left, and I gave some shadows on the stems and things like that as well, like on the leaves, darker over here to the right. And I liked it, but I thought, well, you know what I really like is when we do these palm flowers with yellow and add some of that mustard color as the shadow. I just think it's really beautiful, and it would kind of tie in the centers of our flowers. So this is the one I'm going to do today, but obviously there's lots of ways that you can do it. If there's something different that you see that you like, great. Okay, so get a little closer here. So this is the one for today. So we're gonna kind of quick observe. This is an interesting shape. I don't know what shape I would call that. I don't know, but it's wider on the bottom and kind of comes up as if it were to meet as a traffic cone. It would maybe meet up here, right? So it's the bottom of a traffic cone. That's what that is. And we've got these three sort of main focus flowers right here. This one droops over. So the same thing where our shadow is to the right, or the right in the bottom. Well, the right in the bottom here, to the right only here. And then this one, I think the paint just sort of bled up. So we do want to focus on a darker color down here at the bottom. We've already talked about these ones. I did add some shadow to these, and that's just playing around. I don't think that matters, and I think today you could just paint them green and call them good. But I did focus on the bottom of the traffic cone, how this side, this maybe third, is darker than the rest. Like the sun is somewhere over here, right? And this part is in shadow, which means that this is where our shadow would belong. So all we're kind of doing is looking at how do we make the lightest value be over here, mid value, and like shadow or a darker value on this right side. So if that makes sense, that's kind of where we're going. And I am going to move my camera slightly. I tried to do this differently and I'm a little bit struggling. There, I think that'll be good. I have to see it, otherwise I'll never be in frame. So, okay. Here is our flowers. Got your pencil, you've got your eraser. Remember, sharpen your pencil every now and again. And we are using both pencil and eraser. Nothing's meant to be perfect. And we definitely want to press lightly with our pencil so that we can easily erase, which means we can sketch freely. So the bottom of this is like a little smile, and it is centered. We have equal space on the left and on the right. And also the height is about like my thumb. So if you wanted to place your thumb over on this paper, leave maybe a pencil width underneath of it, and just put a mark on the top and a mark on the bottom, and use that as your beginning for this sort of little smile and a little bigger of a smile down here. This width on the bottom, it's wider. Remember, because if it was going to point up to a triangle, you know, it's kind of narrowing as it gets taller. And it's just going to start like something. You can already tell this one is not the same as this one. I don't care. That's fine. All right. And we talked about already how these three flowers are sort of the main focus. Notice they create a triangle this way, and this one is lower, sort of a middle and a high. And also we need space for things between all three of them. So that also creates a triangle. Wow, we're really heavy on the triangles, and I'm not gonna lie, I didn't actually think of that ahead of time. But it creates balance, and so that's why it is that way. Let's do, these flower shapes are a wonky circle. That's all they are, wonky circle. And this one, since we really love this tip, I mean, come on, that's like the highlight, am I right? I have some things like that in my tattoo. You can't really see it from here, but that I love because I think they're just kind of the most beautiful parts. So in looking at that, you can even do your fake tip and kind of bring it out wider. And over here, you want some sort of a wonky one. I am making the bottom wider than the top on that one, just because I know how I want to place it. So something like that. And then one over here, remember the height is somewhere between the two. You'll have maybe an easier time if you bring it out a little wider. I don't know, something like this. I'm probably going to adjust these shapes a little bit, so I'm pressing lightly. And sometimes I think it's easier to not take your stems and pull them all the way in just yet. So no, we're doing it, but sometimes it is. So press lightly, because what I'm finding is we just might move them. But we want to do this little tiny, what would we call this? It's like the top of an ice cream cone. I don't know. Anyways, it's this little wider shape. Take this, then we'll kind of use that. What it is supporting the bloom. I think we've talked about this in another one. This is just how I say it, which is obviously a weird way. I'm going to do it again over here, and I'm going to kind of curve it over. And if I don't like that in a minute, I'm just going to change it. But for now, it gets me there. They all need to, their stems need to sort of curve and get you into this. So that's just sort of looking like this is the width where they need to land. And then this one, we loved that curve. So let's give it this sort of, right here, it's a very wide upside down rainbow. It's going to come up and down. And that's all that needs. So that gives us our first triangle. Change anything that's weird. I mean, come on, this one was weird. So I'm going to kind of do it backwards. There we go. And they can be kind of perfect circles. I love simplifying flowers into things like this because the easier it is to create a flower in some simple way that you can remember, the more flowers you're going to do. Okay, so we've got those three. Let's start with right here. We've got this one coming up and out. It's a big curved line up and away towards the top right corner. And then this one comes up and away, but kind of goes more to the side. They're sort of splitting the space between this, okay? And this one's little teeny tiny. So I'm gonna take somewhere from here, curve up and away. I'm gonna turn my paper, and then from here, place these little tiny blooms. Small is good. Don't go so small that when you have to paint this, you're like cursing under your breath. You know what I mean? Just something like that's a good start. And like, when do you stop down here? I don't know. So I'm going to add in more. And then if I wanted to make it lower, I could. So this one is going this way. So if I were to make sense of its stem, it probably is going more into this side of the pot. So I'm going to kind of like pretend and then come this way. See how it splits that space really lovely? Okay, so then I'm going to take that, and these are wider. What matters is that they're bigger than these ones, okay? It doesn't matter the shape or anything, how many, none of that matters. That's all I could kind of fit right now, so I'm going to stop. Let's add the center to these wonky flowers. This one's up top. This one is opposite of its stem, so stem over here. Same thing, stem comes here, and it's just a little weird looking oval. Don't do perfect. Perfect isn't found in flowers, if we're being honest. I mean, all right, we could probably refute that, but let's get into this one with these little yellow palms. I use these in so many different pieces of art. I just love them. So it's one main stem coming up and then kind of another big one. Let's start with that. And we are splitting this space, but we also want space for palms on either side. So really try to get like this way if you can. And if you do this and don't like it, go ahead and move it, right? Mine got out of control because it's too tall. So I'm just going to take it down a little because I need space for the circles to sort of live on the ends. And from here, I want little stems that are little outshoots. So I'm just adding a bunch. I just added 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. And then I'm going to stop, pause, and do some circles. Don't make these too tiny. That's one adjustment that I made from this one, is that if they're here, we can't really add 2 colors. They're too small. So that's part of why I made them larger, is that we can fit a shadow color. Even now, I could maybe go a little bit bigger. So if yours are tiny, get out that eraser. It's worth it. I know sometimes it's so annoying to get out the eraser. Like, no, I already did it. It doesn't matter. But man, it was a game changer when I realized, no, the eraser matters. Do it now while you've got the eraser before you get in there with paints. Okay, I love it. It just filled in the space is all it did. I did not worry about any of these leaves. If I decide to put them on later, I'll just do it with a brush. Look at us go, huh? What do we have left? We have this little sprig that goes this way. Notice it matches this one. So we have some sort of continuity, some balance, okay? And then it's got some big leaves here, and I added them in 2 spaces as well, which means we'll be erasing some of our stem lines too. Let's start with this one because it overlaps our pot. So you can just look at the shape and copy it if you can, but I'm going to start with like a wider line here. And swoop it down to a point, and then kind of swoop it around. I'm already going to erase the inside because it's confusing. Don't you think? It's kind of like distracting, I guess. Maybe not confusing, but distracting. I already feel better. And I do want this other little one just because I don't want to have only one. And then I'd like us to get this thing in next. Then we'll figure out what we're going to do here. It's just kind of prioritizing, you know, like I want this one to take the priority versus having to be crammed because I prioritized this. So once again, it has to sort of start in, so kind of looking how you're going to swoop out and away. And you can turn your paper or not. It's up to you. We're going to match this scale. So I'm looking back at it and realizing, okay, I got to go bigger to make them to be the sort of same size. And I will go this way and maybe another little one like that. And what I did was work with the space that I had. That's how I decided where they went. And now I do want to add 2 just because I like how it covers up the stems a bit. So I don't care what stem you put them on. I do not think someone's going to double check and say, like, that's not how it actually looks in real life. And if they do, you might tell them to chill out. I'm going to take them on this one, and somehow I'm fitting 2 of them, and they don't even have to make sense, and it doesn't matter. I will take my kneaded eraser and pinch it so it's small and try to get it in there. Okay, cool. And now I'm going to look at everything because we're basically done with our sketch. I want to decide, do I like it? Did anything get weird? We're not done yet though, are we? Let's draw this. We're going to draw our shadow because today is called shadow. Okay, I'm basically following like this line to kind of go over to the right. Don't overthink it. It's just like a little swoop like that. It could start at the corner, under the corner. That just don't worry about. Just this little nice swoop, and that's all we need. And it's going to serve as a reminder that we want to make sure we don't forget the shadow. So that's there. Okay, I'm looking at the whole thing. If any of these like went really far and they're like over the edge, you might erase whatever's here and kind of pull them back so it feels more like centered and that there's space everywhere around it. But that's personal preference. You could give it a line like this, you know. Here, I'll do it on this one. Like this, like maybe it's a tabletop you're working with, you know. And then you could end up painting this a certain color. It's up to you. That is up to you. This one would be cute with splatter as well, which is what this day was. So you can imagine it. I might even try it on one at the end, but I never know if between now and 5 minutes from now I'm going to remember. So, okay. Let's get our pencil and our eraser out of our way. We'll bring our paint set over and we're going to start making up our puddles. We always like to make up puddles in advance because watercolor is about timing. And I don't want to be doing something over here and then have to spend time over here and then this dries how I didn't want it to. So that's why we do what we do. I will take my spray bottle and spray my paints. Optional, but nice. And we are going to start to get some puddles made up. So I don't know what colors you want. I have been leaning so heavy into honestly all of these colors. So if you're like enough of that and you want red flowers and you want green leaves and maybe you want it to look Christmassy and you want a vibrant blue or you want a red pot as well to really reinforce the sort of holiday colors. If you want fall colors and you want to stick with like oranges and yellows and maybe you go teal on this pot. You know, always options, and I like to throw some of them out there because this is yours, you know. Don't just copy. You make little changes as we go. Well, copy, because that's what we're doing. Honestly, the reason I'm pointing that out is because that is what you do when you start. And you look at references, and that is good. It's not something to be like, oh, I just copied it. Never think that way. This is how we learn. So, okay, taking my brush, dipping it in the water, and I'm going to grab this color. It really is this one again. I think I've used it a lot. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th up from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th down from the top. I should have started at the top. And I'm grabbing a bunch, and it's very dark right away. So I'm cleaning all the water out of my brush and adding water to it to get it to be the color that I want. Great. So water is what makes our colors lighter in watercolor. And if it's too dark, right away clean the pigment out of your brush. That will help. Okay. I like it. I want it to be a little tiny bit more chill. So I'm just going to add the littlest bit of orange. Just a little bit. And now I really like it. I added a little bit more blue to kind of tip it back again. nice dusty denim color. That's what I like. It's not going to look the same as this, but just do some kind of blue that you like. There are so many choices, so play with your paints for a minute. And I will remind you that watercolor is about playing with color and water. It's about watching the color of your water jar turn colors. It's about all of it. So probably I should relax. I feel a lot of energy. Okay. I am going to get into yellow. I'm often choosing the third color up from the bottom left because that's a yellow that I just really like. And when we get into our shadows of our yellow, we'll be taking it directly from our paint and we'll use this mustard color over to the right that's near the browns. Okay, so I've got some yellow, small puddle for that. Notice, because I'm only going to need very tiny spaces. So if you have a giant puddle, maybe make a new one and make it small. And we will pick what color green we like. So for this one, I kind of just chose the bottom right. I think this is mainly the one from the bottom right. We're going to test that out. It's a green that has just a little bit of yellow in it, but it also didn't require any mixing because it just comes right off of our palette, the one on the bottom right. And I think it's a lovely sort of fresh green. So I've got that. So now we have blue, green, yellow. We need our purplish pink or whatever color you're planning on doing. And we'll also need a little bit of gray. So for this color, I am going to take from both the bottom center. Actually, I think it's maybe just the bottom center this time. A lot of times I mix pink into it, but today I don't think I did, and I'm going to leave it this way. So this is sort of a reddish purple from the bottom center. And once again, I do not need a big amount of space because I'm not filling in anything large. So I think, honestly, that is probably good. And when we load in our darker color, we'll do it right from our paints, and that makes it easy that we didn't mix, so we know it's just going to be right there. All right. For just our thought is that when we get to our green, this is going to be like your lighter color, and if we are going to add this darkness, it's going to require like either grabbing a different green or more paint and less water, so you have a darker green. But we'll worry about that in a moment. For now, we're going to do this gray, and I do want to show you one cool thing about this shadow is that we added in the color of the priority flower, right? Those big blooms. See, that color is in the shadow, and I think that's just beautiful. I actually did it in this one as well, but when I dried it, it kind of disappeared. You can hardly see it. So, but that's one thing we're going to do when we get to that. So for now, gray, it is the tip of your brush into your water and like one little swipe of black, maybe a couple, but we just want this small puddle like this. We don't need a lot. And we know that when we create the shadow, we will also add some of our purple pink sort of color in there. All right, so let's relax your body if you need to. I'm kind of moving my paints out of the way. I need a good stretch. I've been painting a lot lately and my shoulders are sore. I love to lean backwards. Okay, guys, if you need to, lean backwards over the back of your chair and try to relax your body. It's such a good stretch for when you're painting. I hope somebody liked that. All right, so we're going to get into it. We are going to start with our pot. Okay, so me mixing the color wrong maybe messed that up a little bit. I'm going to grab that color I took from and create this other little puddle just because, remember, we're going to start wet on wet. We're going to do the light color and load in some of this darkness, so I do need to have two colors ready. So I can try to get there by adding some orange to it, but I do need the darkness right here. Okay. Sorry about that, I forget. So here we are. We're taking our lighter blue color. I have maybe half of my brush full, not a full giant brush, but half my brush full of paint and water. I'm running the tip of my brush along the edges and pressing into the belly in this part so that I get the whole thing filled in efficiently. And you can kind of tell where it's puddling or pooling is where you just see more paint. So I lifted a tiny bit of that up by just touching my brush to it and wiping it on my towel and coming back. I maybe did it twice. And while it is wet, I'm doing this extra bit. If it's dry, I will not get this effect. So if it's already dried, you maybe just go over it one more time. In watercolor, you really do need to have enough water to get the effects that you want. So I added this darker color to maybe a third, and I might just do the teeniest bit along the bottom and this other side. And I'm basically just gonna let it dry, and it'll look cool. And this is the kind of thing, try it a couple times because you get practice on sketching, and you'll get all these different effects on the pot. So, okay, we have got that one. And from here, I think we can actually take our blue and do this teeny tiny leaves over here. So a reminder, I'm taking my tip of my brush in this small amount of paint like this, and that's what I'm going to use to fill this in. And however works for you is great. It's very light on the tip of your brush, and I will also run my brush up that stem really light on the tip of my brush because it's just so tiny, and I would like it to sort of stay that way. Okay, and then I'll keep them going. I like to do these, well, I always say efficiently, but I like things to dry as one shape versus leaf, stem, leaf, right? Because in watercolor, you'll kind of see the overlapping. So we just try to get it in there, get it done. Beautiful. And I like how this color matches your pot. So if you want it to, that's a good way to do it. Look at what color the water is in my jar. I'm not sure if you can actually tell. It's really pretty though. All right, I'm not sure the lighting helped us with that one. Let's keep moving. From here, I'm looking where we can go next that's not touching something else. I think we can get our, we're calling them priority blooms. It's like we're traveling. They're priority pass travelers. And the thing we're doing is we're doing wet on wet. So remember, we created a little puddle, and we're going to fill in, remember, we're going to preserve the space there for the yellow. And I've got this whole thing filled in with my lighter color. I'll take out any excess water. I'm taking my brush and going straight in, and you see this, to my purple without adding any water. And now I'll touch that along the bottom, and it's going to kind of keep it along the bottom. So remember, our light source is kind of over here to the left. So I wanted this to be more on the bottom and the right. And in a moment, we'll do it again. So I'm cleaning out my brush because I don't want that dark paint on there. I just want it to be that lighter color to start with. And filling in the next one. It needs to be wet enough that I can blend another color in it, right? So it all has to still be shiny, reflecting the light. And then when I add the next color, I'm not adding one bit of water. I'm just taking my brush right to that bottom center of my palette and rubbing it into that reddish purple paint and then touching it in here. I touched it to the right side because our light source is over here. I'm not worrying about a highlight today, just the shadow. And we're going to get onto the third one. So cleaning your brush one more time. Watching what color your water turns in your jar because it's fun. And we'll fill out our third one. Make sure your puddle kind of looks like the same color every time, you know, because you're back and forth to it. It can change. And where I see the darker pigment, it's puddling. So I'm touching my brush to my towel, coming back. Now I know the whole thing is shiny and reflective still. I'll grab paint right from that paint and touch it down here. I want to kind of go on either side of where the yellow is going to be if I can. And I think this gives a really cool effect, and I'm going to let it be. I'm not blending it anymore because do you see the water's already pulling it up into the rest. So I want to do as little amount as I kind of can. You know, you're just sort of watching. But I think that looks super cool, so I'm going to let it dry. And I'm going to have us keep working because not a lot of things are touching each other. We don't need to go to the dryer. But when we get into this yellow, it's going to be a little bit tricky because it's such a tiny space. So if you're doing this large, it's just you're going to be working with different amounts of water and everything. But for us right now, we are taking, you know, you've got a clean, dry brush. You'll take the tip of your brush and put it in your yellow paint. And maybe do 3 of these to start with, or half of them. It's up to you. You have to know that they're still wet to add that next color. And it's always going to make it easier if you're doing less at a time. But I know I can do them all together, so I don't know. I'm going to do one more at least. And then I'm going to take my brush. I'm not adding any water because I don't want water. I want it just to pull just a little, and I'm going to touch the bottom. And what I'm watching for is I want to see how far it's going to pull this paint. Is it too dry? Is it too wet? And if it's pulling it just a little like this, then that's great. And you're not going to have a lot of control over what it does. You just, all you really have control is that it's somewhere on the bottom or the right. Doesn't it give such a cool impression of light and shadow? So I'll clean my brush now, and I'm going to do the rest of them. So I'm just kind of doing them in 2 chunks. And so getting these wet first, but not so wet that when we add our next color, it just, you know, flies across them. So I'm also lifting a little bit of that paint back up. I'm taking my brush and getting into my mustard yellow. It's called yellow ochre. And I'll do this again, focusing on the right side and bottom. If you lose control on some of them, it doesn't matter because it's like a puzzle and these are the individual pieces, but later you see it as the whole image. All right, so that is those. Now we have some things that are wet, so we just want to be careful not to accidentally touch them. If your pot is wet, actually, let's just all give it a dry. It feels super safe to do so right now. So everybody, we're going to give it a quick dry. If you don't see the light reflecting at all, you probably don't need to, but otherwise it's just safe. And I love starting to see how things dry and what cool markings you have. Like, look at that. It's so cool, you know, and it's like you can't exactly know how it's going to look. So it's fun that it gets sort of revealed. All right, so let's get on to our green. And if your puddle has dried up a little, you may need to sort of dip the tip of your brush into your water and mix it around, maybe add a tiny bit more green into it if needed. And we're gonna just start to sort of fill in for now. Let's first do our 3 priority flowers. Once I say something weird, I just gotta stick with it. Okay, so now I'm doing their little base and their stem. I'm trying to find it and follow it. And that's for all of them. And just this one's just kind of quick and simple. The only thing that really matters, you don't want too much water or it's gonna feel out of control. And you don't want to press too hard on your brush. So really light on the tip of your brush for those. And then I did those 3. I think I'll also do these leaves. So we've got these 4 that are like a separate one. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And the reason I distinguished those, because remember these are the same. So let's make these maybe a slightly, you can do all the same color or you can slightly change it. Let's just do them the same color for today. It's up to you. I don't know what you're doing. And I'm gonna come up here and go really light on the tip of my brush and just cover these stems. Lovely. And yeah, I am gonna keep going with the same color here. And the reason I'm choosing to do that is because then if we mix and come up with another color in a moment, we'll do darker, and that's how we'll get our shadow. And we're going to just simplify from making this video too long, but also making you create a whole bunch of greens. Okay, so we're filling in and realize I'm not doing the pressure thing that we learned on day 2. I could be, but instead I'm just outlining the leaf with the tip of my brush and filling it in. Remember how I said there's no test? There really is no test. Cool. I love it. Here's what we have left. Centers of these flowers and then some shadow on the actual stems and this shadow down below. So let's do the shadow down below first. This is your puddle of gray. So make sure that it's still gray. It has enough water in it. It's not too dark, you know, kind of look at it. And you might want to watch this one first, but all we're doing is just filling it in, and it needs to be reflective still, so you can see the light reflecting. And then from there, either from your puddle or from your paint, you're going to add some purple right into it like this. And ideally, you'll see a little bit of the gray and a little bit of the purple. If your gray is too light, you can add some darker gray into it when you're here. But I try not to let it take over the purple. I don't really want a purple shadow. I want a gray shadow with a little bit of purple reflected into it. And once you get that one done, I know I'm kind of moving along fast, but I just think this one might be kind of long. So pause when you need. And I'm going to take my brush. I went into the yellow puddle that we created initially. And I'm just filling these ones in. We're going to keep those ones simple today. This is so cute. Okay, one more quick dry, and then we'll add in our shadows to the stems. I don't want to do a lot with the shadow on the stems because I just think we don't actually need it today. But I am going to grab some green paint, and I'll show you what I'm doing here. I'm getting into, my green came from this bottom right. So I'm very little water. So maybe the tip of my brush in the water, and then I'm grabbing some of that. Then I'm going to decide if that's dark enough or not. And if it's not, I might go into one of the other greens. Yep, I just did that third one up. Just added a little bit more. Got a little bit darker for me, and that's what I want to see. Remember, this is a tiny puddle because we really want control here. And remember, our rule from day 3 is the more water, the less control, and the less water, the more control. So I cleaned my brush out even just now and dried it on my towel, and I'll take that brush and use that in here, and I have even more control. Okay, so now let's get in here. We are going to do our little tiny shadow. So pop quiz, where does the shadow go? Where's our light source? Light source is over here on the left. So our shadow will go on the right or under, okay? And this isn't like a rule of thumb for everything. It's a rule of, it's just for this one. We created that rule for this. Like I said, most of the time, if you're working from a reference, you're going to look at where the light and shadows are, and that's how you'll do it. Okay, so to the right of, I'm going to do these green stems here, to the right of or under. So for these stems, I'm going under. I'm just going to do this little swoop underneath them. I actually don't even think I want to do the top ones. I'm just going to do the bottom. See, I did the same thing here. And I will do that again for this one down here. So I'm not covering the light green. I'm going just right tight to it and under it because I don't want to cover the light green, or else why did we do it, you know? 1, 2, 3. And something that's kind of nice to do is, since these two are right next to each other, if I made the back one darker, it's just going to distinguish the two from each other a little bit. I think that looks cool. And you can do this anywhere else you want. I think I will only do it on the stems of these, what did we call them, priority blooms? And then that'll be it. So refresh your brush as needed. Make sure your paint is dark enough. And even there, I'm going to stop here, and then it bends down, and it would actually be on the right side. But a lot of that you're not going to exactly know. You're just going to guess, and that's great. Oh, man. I love this one. I think it would also be really great if it had the outline. I'm not going to actually do it. I'm just going to do it a little tiny bit right here so we can see the look of it on one of my other ones. And you see how I talk about just like do 5 of them and then you can play. Like this one is not important to me because it's not my final one. So now I can play on that one, which means I could add, look at jagged leaves, right? Or maybe on the pot. So if you get in there with your ink, you can clean up that shape a little bit, right? And add some little perspective lines. So you got options if you want to get into there with your ink, but I think it's really lovely either way. I can't believe we're done with day 16. You guys really are rock stars, and I'll see you tomorrow for day 17, which is color bleed.